Hey everybody, this is Mike. Welcome back to my shop again. Apologize, it's been a little while since I've done a video. It's been hectic at work and it's been a long, cold winter here, so I've just haven't been doing anything really out of the ordinary. It's just been normal, routine, general repair type stuff, a couple of welding projects, pretty boring stuff. So I haven't done any videos in a while, but we actually had here in northern Utah a day last week that it got almost to 40 degrees. So and the sun was out, so a bit of spring fever. So I decided I probably ought to start getting going on a couple projects that I've been wanting to do before the RV season starts this year. So I have a Roadmaster Sterling tow bar, and then I have the netting that's called a tow defender that goes out across it for when I flat tow my Jeep. I bought it about 9 years ago, and it was used when I bought it. I think it was a couple of years old when I bought it. So this tow bar has probably 60,000 maybe miles of towing on it. So I decided to go ahead and rebuild it. There's no slop or anything in it per se, but some of the arms as they slide out are a little just slide a little bit. They don't slide as well as I'd like, so I'm going to pull it apart. I've got new bushing kits and everything for it. I bought them right through they're Roadmaster kits, but I bought them through eTrailer. Now, for those of you RVers that go and hit a lot of the FMCA conventions and rallies and so forth, most of your major tow bar manufacturers, whether it be Roadmaster, Blue Ox, Demco, those are the biggies, but there might be a couple others that actually attend these rallies, and for a very nominal fee, very small fee, you can actually go over and bring them your tow bar and they'll rebuild it for you, put it all back together and hand it back to you. I heard in some instances, depending on the situation, they may not charge you at all. So I can't verify that, but I have heard people say that basically for just for parts, you bring them to your tow bar, they'll rebuild it and hand it back to you, and you're good to go again. So any of you who are thinking about attending an FMCA rally or a convention or something like that, it may be worthwhile if you want to drop it off and have them rebuild it. I know you can also send them back and they will rebuild it and send it back to you, but then you have freight and everything else incorporated into it, and they are quite heavy. So I'm going to go ahead. I've got my cover still on mine. I just pulled it out of the garage here, so I still have my cover on mine, and I'm going to try to do this without having to remove my tow defender system. It bolts on down underneath here by the yoke, so I'm going to try to do it without that. If not, worst case scenario, there's 4 bolts and that component comes off. But again, this is, let me go ahead and pull this cover off. So I just put the cover on when we hit campgrounds. I'll put the cover back on it, and then when I store it and so forth. So I'm going to set that out of the way. So basically, like I said, this is the Sterling. It's all aluminum. The cables run up underneath, so they're not hanging down below. It does have a lot of nice features. I had to modify the tow defender to fit on my system, because it's actually made to go to their bracketry that comes off the Jeeps. I custom built my tow system so that it's not a bolt-on deal to either the D-rings or to the frame like the kits are for the Jeep from Roadmaster. I built a cross member that goes up and behind my bumper. I custom built my bumper also, but I custom built this bracket that goes up behind so that it stays back behind the bumper and behind the plane from the bumper to the tires, so that it doesn't interfere with my approach angle for off-roading. So I had to modify the mounts just a slight little bit for the tow defender to actually pull taut when when it pulls out, when you unroll it out after you get the tow bar hooked up to the Jeep. But it was just a couple of holes and a few little modifications. It wasn't too bad. I won't go into all details on that, because I doubt very seriously many people will be faced with that dilemma. Most people do not run the tow defender, they just run the tow bar. I like it because it does keep the mud flap on the coach, all those things do help keep the rocks off, but there's still, the tires on the Jeep are rather large lug, they pick up rocks, and this really does help protect not only the front of the Jeep, but also the back of the coach a little bit. So that's why I've been running this. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe pull the camera in a little closer here, where I'm on the bench, and I will, again, I'm going to try to do this with the toe defender and everything hooked to the yoke. If it looks like it's going to be too cumbersome and too difficult to maneuver around with the camera and everything, I may just take it off, but I'm going to try to go ahead and do it. These aren't really that bad to rebuild if you want to do it yourself, but just please remember, this is a tow system. This has anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 pounds being towed behind your RV, so it is there's a safety factor. If you don't feel comfortable rebuilding these, please don't. I kind of waffled on whether I should show how to do these or not, but I'd rather, if people are going to do it, I'd rather them have the correct information and visually see it. So I decided to go ahead and do it. If you don't feel comfortable, again, send it back to Roadmaster or have it done at a convention or something like that. But if you're fairly mechanically inclined, they're really not that bad to do. So I hope this helps anybody who's thinking about doing it. It either helps them do it, or it at least gives you some information to where when you send it back or take it to the convention or whatever and have it done, you'll have a good idea of what they're going to do to it to freshen it up. There's new acetal washers that go in the connectors at each end, plus inside, plus at the yoke, and then there's neoprene. Neoprene with polyurethane, I can't remember. They look like gland washers that go inside where the rod pulls through. There's a couple different versions of these tow bars dependent on your serial number. So, and there are some differences. So when I get to those sections that might be different, I will let you know whichever style you have, which process you need to do. So there's only one area that it affects, but there is a difference in it depending on where your serial number falls, whether it's an earlier or a late version of the Sterling Roadmaster. So again, I'm going to go ahead and bring the camera in a little closer and set this up on the bench so you can get a better view. All right, so I think I'm going to be okay here doing this with the netting, the toe defender still on. So just kind of tip it to one side. You have to do one side at a time. Now, the play that I was talking about, as you can kind of see, there's just a little bit of play, a little bit of rocking down in there. Not a ton. The little acetal washers are still intact. They haven't, they're not so bad that they've busted all apart and fallen out. There's just a little, there's a little bit of play in there. The arm as it slides in and out isn't too bad, but I can kind of feel just a little bit of slop in there when I'm sliding it in and out. It's a good idea to keep these lubed up. I just usually spray a little bit of silicone. Just either, I know Napa makes one. This is Curtis Industries makes one. It's just a spray. I'll just spray it on there about every couple of times I tow, and then work it in and out. It just helps keep everything lubed and slides free. You want to be careful what you put on it, because you don't want to track dirt and dust to this and then slide it in and drag it all throughout your bushings. Now, put this in here. So there's a couple of different versions here. Actually, there's two repair kits, so I'm going to give you the part numbers here. This one here, I don't know why they don't put them all in one kit, but they have basically it's an internal and an external rebuild kit. The internal one has these couple of urethane bushings, and then a couple of the nuts for the for inside on the rod, and that part number is 910003-40, and that's for that's for the Roadmaster. Now the other kit is it has the new acetal washers, the large, I believe these are 3/4 inch bolts that go through the yoke down here. It also has the new bolts for the cut connectors. However, I put longer ones in because I actually adapted my toe defender over to this, so I won't be using those. Comes new torsion springs for your levers. And that repair kit is part number 910003-30. So you've got the -30 for the external components and the -40 for the internals. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start pulling this apart. Now, there's two variations here. There's, if your serial number on yours, and the serial number will be stamped on the side, down inside here. There we go. Right in between the arms, depending on which side you're looking at, there will be your tag with your serial number on it. If your serial number is 14,500 and lower, you will have the original style, or the first generation, old style, whatever you want to call it. Let's just call it first generation of cut connector on this. And basically what it is a threaded nut that goes over this rod with a bolt that goes through it. At the end of the rod, there's a concave slot milled in the end. So that milled slot has to line up with this bolt. So if that's the case, say your sleeve is on here, I'm going to use this socket basically to simulate that sleeve. If this sleeve is on here, what you want to do is take a Sharpie or something and mark at the end of where that sleeve is in relation on this rod. Then you're going to pull this bolt out and thread that sleeve, or that nut, that coupling nut off. Then you go ahead and pull everything else out the other end down here. But that has to come off first. Now, when you go put it back together, again, this is on the first generation. If you're going to put it back together, you want to thread that on up into where your Sharpie mark is. And in that rod, where that concave slot is milled, that's going to line up with where the bolt goes through to lock it in place. This is critical because if you have it threaded on too far, that concave slot is going to be too far and the bolt's not going to go through, the shoulder bolt. If it's too far out, you're not going to have enough engagement in there, and it could potentially, worst case scenario, thread off and have that come off while you're going down the road. So it's imperative that you mark correctly, measure somehow, and orientate that coupling nut back on there properly. So, and again, that's if you have the serial number 14500 or less or earlier. If you have 14,501 and later, you're going to have the second generation, which basically has the these ends are going to be different because the other one will be bigger to go over the coupling nut. This one's going to be a little smaller. You'll have an acetal washer down in each place there, and the bolt just goes right through it with a nylock. Because like I say, these have to come off because this rod goes up the end and comes out the other end up here. So, and there again, the serial number is going to be right up here. Mine just happens to be in the 23,000 number range. So this is a second generation. This is the newer style, even though it's probably 10, 11 years old, 10 years at least. This is the newer second generation. So I'll go ahead and start by taking this off and then pushing this rod out, and I'll show you what it looks like when you get it out. Now the other thing you're going to be replacing is on these plastic caps here on the ends. These pull out. Like that. These actually, it might not be a bad idea to keep these, hold on to these, because these actually do come up missing. As you see, I'm missing one already. That was actually missing when I purchased it. So it keeps debris and everything out from where your release levers are and your little torsional springs that hold the arms. So I probably would recommend you keep your old ones, because you never know, if you lose one, then at least you have one to put back in the hole and get you by. So we'll set those aside. Like I said, again, there's new ones that come. There's 4 new ones that come in the kit for your external. So well, let me grab a, that looks like probably a 3/4 inch wrench and ratchet for this. Go ahead and pull the end of this off. Oh, man, I'm flopping this on the floor, I can tell. If I'm not careful, I'll end up knocking it on over on my foot. So let's go about this easy way here. Okay, now as you're pulling these apart, watch and make certain you watch how things come apart. So I've got the nut, the bolts coming off. There's a flat washer on the outside. Sometimes I'll put an acetal, not so much up here. I have seen it, but generally they're going to be on the inside, and then they can be inside and outside up here at the yoke. So if you look in there, hope this is showing up on video. There's one acetal washer here, one there. Let me just dig these new ones out of here so you can see what I'm talking about. So hopefully you can put it in perspective. These are what's going to go back down in there when it's going back together. And there's 4 of them in the kit, so one on each side. So pull that out. And there's the old ones. Like I said, they're not busted, they're not broken, they're intact, but I'm going to replace them. So go ahead and put that back together. And just set it aside. I will be using new Nylox because I don't like to reuse. On something critical like this, I don't like to reuse Nylox. So, okay, now if you decide to just do the inside, you don't have the play, or excuse me, the outside. If you don't have the play, like, let me see if this shows up. You can just see, if you look in relationship to the housing, to the rod, and there's a little bit of play in there. And I mean, it's not going to be an interference fit because it has to be able to move, but there's a little more slop there than I feel like it should have. And I don't know. It'll have a little bit because, like I said, it's not going to be an interference fit, but that's just a little bit more than it should have. So that's why I opted to rebuild this. If yours is fairly good and you don't have a lot of play there, and you're just going to replace the outside, you don't need to pull this rod out. Now, that being said, there's a snap ring here. Might as well just go ahead and pull that off of them right here so you can see what I'm talking about. There's a small retaining ring. Small retaining ring right there. Set that aside. And then you have a pin. Comes out. And it's kind of hard to see in the video, but there's a torsion spring. Let me grab you the new one. I hope this is helpful, that if I pull the new ones out and show you. This new one's going to be orientated in a manner to where it sits in there like that, and then you'll have to manipulate it a little bit to get the pin back through and it goes back in. So that's what it's going to look like, and it's going to slide inside of there. And that's just your return for your release levers. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that. Maybe I'll pull that. It's in there pretty good. I'll push it. How's that? So there's the pin. And running your fingernail across it, you can see lines where the torsion spring, again, this torsion spring is going to sit in there like that, it's going to go through like so, and then the retaining ring, the snap ring, external snap ring, will go on outside that. So you can kind of see some marks, but you run your fingernail over them, and they're really not. They're just marks. They're not grooves or anything. If that pin's damaged, you may want to replace it, but this actually is in good shape. I'll put a little bit of lube on it when I put it back together. So now that that's done, I'll reach in there and pull that torsion spring out. So there's a torsion spring. I have seen these break. It's not real common, but I have seen them break in there and not really hold that handle down. So now that that's out of the way, now that we got our end connector off, I'm going to push this out of the tube and it'll come out down here. See, yeah, it's going to be close. It shows up on video. Okay, there it is. Folks, that's why I'm rebuilding this. You can see how all the crud buildup, road grime, moisture. You know, I wish I could say I traveled all in nice fair weather, but unfortunately many times you get caught in the bad weather and all that road spray and everything gets caught up in here, which is why it's crucial to keep this lubed. So, hope that's showing up with all the buildup and the crud. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart, and you've got a jam nut, a lock nut, and then you've got your sleeves here, and then it works on down. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart, and we'll get her cleaned up. Actually, let me go ahead and zip this apart. That's right. And I also like to put a little bit of Loctite on these. Now, one thing I should remember, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but as you're putting this back together, you want an inch. As you're putting this back together, between the inside lip here and the inside lip here. So let's go inside lip there and inside lip here, you want an inch. So that's where you're going to set the preload on this lock nut, is you want to get an inch between those. So I measured this one just before, and it's just barely over an inch, but that turned a revolution or so. So when I put this back together, I'll Loctite it, put it on to where that specification right there is an inch, and then I'll put the jam nut on and tighten the jam nut down when I'm reassembling it. So I'll come back when we assemble it and revisit that measurement, but that's where you're looking at for that inch. Okay, there's that. There's the components all ready to come off, and I'll clean these all up. I'm going to take these over probably to the wire wheel. There's quite a bit of rust down underneath these, so I'm going to soak these in the solvent tank, and then take that crud off there and come back when all the components are clean. All right, as I started pulling this apart, to those of you paying close attention might have noticed that as you've got I think this is like a phenolic spacer, and you've got a spring, and you've got a collar, then you've got a washer, then you've got the other two end to end. These basically give it support this direction. So as I pulled these off, to those of you who might have been familiar with this, paying attention, you notice that there's something missing right here. In the kit, you've got 6 of these phenolic spacers that go on, but you also have 2 urethane spacers that go right there, and it did not come out with the rod. So I looked up inside there, and sure as shitting, it's stuck about halfway in there. So went ahead and just took a long pry bar. Make sure you get your release lever up out of the way, and reach it in there, and you kind of have to. I'm using an angled pry bar, so I'm going to push it a little bit here, and then turn it, push it a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of walk it around the wall of that until boom, there it is. There's the old one. So that went right there. So, and you can see it's got quite a bit of slop on there. So that goes there. And the pry bar back out. So now the inside of the tube looks pretty much about like the rest of this does. So I'm going to go through and soak some rags down and push them through here and clean this out really good, and then clean everything up and start reassembling. So I'm going to clean everything up, and then I'll come back as I start reassembling it so you can see how everything stacks back together. Okay, so I got everything cleaned up, ready to go back and reassemble. So we are going to take 3 of these, try to think what they called these in the book. These are nylon, and then the urethane. So we take the urethane one and put it on, and it looks like it's got more of a radius on one side and a straight cut on the other, so it's a little more chamfered on one side. I'm going to put it on that way so it'll go in and be chamfered. So there's that piece out of the way. Then we're going to take, actually I'm going to go one step further here. This isn't necessary, but I've done this in the past, and as corroded as these were coming off of here, I'm just going to brush a little tiny bit of anti-seize, and I use this sparingly because it goes a long ways. So I'm going to brush a little bit of anti-seize on the shaft, and go ahead and you take one of the nylon bushings, put it on. Actually, I'll turn it this way so it's the same way it come off. Then you've got the spring. Then you've got the sleeve. Then let's see, you got a washer, steel washer. Wait a minute, take that back. The steel washer goes on. Take that back. You've got the 2 nylatrons together. Steel washer, 2 nylatron, steel washer, and then I'm going to get some Loctite and put the lock nut, and there it is, jam nut. So I'll move these components, these are the old ones, over here out of the way. So let's put a little bit of Loctite here on this. And those that were paying attention, quiz time. What's the length that zips down to? This right here needs to be 1 inch, so we're going to run that down. Actually, that's just a little bit too far. 1 inch, right on the money. Okay, so we're sitting at 1 inch. I'm going to go ahead and take this actually over and put in the soft jaws on the vise to put this jam nut on real quick. Okay, so I've got the jam nut tightened on, Loctited. I double checked my measurement, 1 inch there. I sprayed some brake wash and pulled a towel, forced the towel through here, cleaned out all the corrosion inside of there. Next thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of silicone spray and just ever so lightly spray it on the components as you get to here. You want to lift up on your freedom arm, your release handle. And feed it through. And you can see where it pulls out, and it should drop and lock. So nice and smooth. I'm going to lube that up just a little bit with some silicone spray in here, and then put the end piece here on, and the washer, or not the washer, the torsion spring will go inside there. So I'm just going to take and spray a little bit on there. And I'm going to run this in and out a few times. And the compressor just kicked on. So nice and smooth. Now I'm going to take my new torsion spring and I'm going to slide that up into place. I'm going to kind of guide it in with my screwdriver. Hoping that's able to see that in the video there. So I'll clean up my pin here, put a little bit of silicone spray on it, and chase the pin through. Got a little bigger screwdriver there. Should grab a little pry bar. And there we go. And then last, put the retaining clip back on. Maybe. There we go. Put the retaining clip back on. Alright, so I'm going to take and spray just a little bit of silicone spray up in here onto this pin. It slides beautifully. Probably better than it did new. I'm going to put these plastic covers back in. Alright, now I'm going to slide this arm back in where hopefully, let me check and make sure. Yep. Okay, then we're going to put this end back on. So there's the old nylock. I've got a new nylock. It didn't come with one because I've changed my bolt. It comes with these small stainless shoulder bolts with a 3/8 nylock, and I've replaced these with a 1/2 inch 20, so I need to put the new 1/2 inch 20 nylock on. So again, what I'll do is I'll turn that so it goes in one side through an acetal washer. Then shift the collar over to the other side. And through, flat washer on the outside, nylock. And it's always a good idea, I always check these before I actually hitch the Jeep. I'll check these out really good. But there's, in a nutshell, And you just want to tighten these down tight. You don't actually want to crush this end, because you can, this is aluminum, the steel sleeve, so you don't actually want to crush that. You just want to tighten it down tight. So, that being said, this arm is done. So I'll now you go ahead and down at the yoke, you kick it, you kick it the other way, so you're pulling everything out the other direction, and you repeat the same thing on the other side. So I'll go ahead and do that. Won't necessarily do that on camera because it's just a repeat, but I'll go ahead and get the other one done, and then we'll do the yoke bushings. So, okay, both arms have been rebuilt now. Got all new caps on. They slide out very smooth. Like I said, probably nicer than, every bit as nice as when it was new, although 9 years ago it's kind of hard for me to gauge, but I could definitely tell over the last couple of years or so it's been getting a little stiff, pulling out, and even after I lubed it, it'd be good for a very short time. So I kind of had a funny feeling those bushings in there were heading south on me. So next up is this yoke area. So this is pretty simple, pretty straightforward to do, and I'm actually just going to do it in place. 1.125" wrench and socket. I'll pull it apart, and you've got a steel washer, an acetal washer, which is looking pretty thin. Yeah, in comparison to these new ones, it's, I don't know, it might be close. It's hard to tell. I'll put a caliper on it when I pull it out, but there's a little bit of play in there. Not bad, but these come with there's different versions. These ones here have a couple under each. You have to pay attention when you pull this apart, because it builds up the thickness between these two, the left and right arms. Okay, so I got the bolt out. There's 2 under the head of the bolt, under that steel washer. Then there was 3 under here, 3 under here, 1 under here, 2 between there, and 1 on the bottom. So you can see I've got them all laid out as I come out. And I have seen some variations there, so that's why I tell people to make sure you look closely. So now I'll go through and put the same amount back in, and it comes with a new stove style lock nut with actual Loctite in the threads. Just hope you can see that there on camera. So, okay, now this one here, we've got a nut, and it does come with a new nut also. A steel washer, then you got a acetal steel. So the only place the nylon or the acetal washers are on is on either side of the actual yoke here. So simply just go ahead and pull this one out. And there's the 2. And actually I'm going to go clean the threads up on this a little bit, put a little anti-seize in there, and I'll be back. Alright, so that's one Sterling, Roadmaster Sterling tow bar, refurbished, rebuilt, whatever you want to call it. See all the new washers up in through here, at the pivot there, so everything's tightened. One last comment, as you're hooking this up, generally what I like to do is before each trip, I'll put it stick it in the coach, and then I'll move the arms to one side and inspect all of my welds, all around here. I'll look for cracks, I'll look for anything out of the ordinary, then flip it to the other side and do the same thing. Check everything over before each trip, just before I'm getting ready to leave. So it's a good idea to check everything. These are pretty robust. They've got a 6,000 pound capacity, but like I said, they are welded components, so I like to check everything over really good. I check my fasteners, so this thing hopefully will provide another, well, I've had it 9 years, it's probably 10 or 11 years old. I hope it provides another 10 or 11 years of service. So I hope that was insightful and helpful to anybody who's looking at rebuilding one of these. And if you have any questions, please feel free to post in the comments. I'll see if I can answer them. Again, if you have any comments that would be helpful on my videos, I welcome the comments. Look forward to them so I can hopefully get better at these. I appreciate it, and thank you for watching.